been meeting their regional housing need. Their housing element has been found to be in compliance with state law. And
Yeah, my understanding from reading press coverages is that they have, if not met, but made significant progress towards a multi-level of affordability that they actually have achieved. And there have been numerous write-ups on it, and I just wondered if you had any specifics on how they've done that, how they've handled it.
Well, one benefit in the Sonoma County areas, we have some very strong affordable housing developers who will work in connection with private developers, and that spreads the cost amongst the various people and creates strong incentives for, and of course it's not a voluntary ordinance in Sonoma County, but it creates strong incentives to develop the affordable housing. They haven't found that it's restrictive. The problems with the market now obviously is affecting everyone, but Sonoma County has not found that their inclusionary ordinances have interfered with the continued development of housing in the area.
I believe it's in the Petaluma area, they've even exceeded what they have been required to produce.
I believe that that's right.
Can I continue on?
Please.
To Supervisor Pinch's comments and questions on the additional options on page 13 of the summary, I think we're talking about two issues here. Talking about the septic issue and additional units, I think, is one discussion through environmental health that we certainly could have. The other is choosing to waive building fees for housing units of 1,000 square feet is something we talked about before, and the point I made then, which I'll make again, is I don't think in and of itself, just that action creates any nexus to affordability. And I think that the state would find that that's true. In theory, I understand, Supervisor Pinches, what you're saying, and I think in some instances that might occur. But with housing costs going up, I think a number of folks are trying to leverage their property, as they certainly rightly can. But I think we're not going to be creating and achieving what we're supposed to be doing with respect to affordability in our mandates by going down that path. As an example, I know someone on the coast that recently had, by a certified property management facility, had a house assessed or reviewed for what could a small one-bedroom cottage rent for, and it was I think it was around $1,200, and that because that's what the market would bear. So I think I don't think it makes sense to remove building fees for people that happen to have property where they might be able to add an additional unit, because how would we presume to know what they would want to do with that unit, and there would be no nexus or connection to the affordability issue. So someone could decide that they wanted to retire, live in their newly constructed 1,000 square foot structure that they paid no building fees on, and then rent out their primary residence, and it would be copacetic under county statutes, but it doesn't get us down the path where we need to go. The other thing we need to be mindful of there is that requires staff time to process a building permit for 1,000 square foot residence, and someone's going to be footing that bill. So the question would be, well, who's paying for someone to create an enhancement to their own property, which may or may not be affordable? I don't think the taxpayers should bear that. I don't think that the county has the ability to sort of absorb that into an already overloaded planning and building department. So wouldn't that actually equal a gift of public funds to some degree if people can come in and just get it under 1,000 square feet and say, I want a permit for 980 square feet, and they don't pay a fee? Somebody, who's bearing the cost to do the processing of that fee, of that permit? I think it's illogical. I think you could say it makes sense and it could happen, but I'd say the number of cases where that would happen would be very, very small, and people would take advantage of this for their own development and their own economic interest. And so until we get some kind of nexus to the affordability, I'm hard pressed to see how a number of things are really going to create the units that we're talking about. How when we need to define to the state what we have done that actually has created the affordable units, which is what this document starts out talking about, and the ability to demonstrate that, I just don't see how waiving fees that then someone else has to pay. So that means the other consumers and taxpayers have to bear the cost of that. It doesn't make any logical sense to me. So I would want to see from planning and building side what does it cost to process a permit along those lines, and then see where that takes us with respect to who's paying. Because I don't think it's fair to others to pay when it would just benefit someone who might be in that arena, that they have the ability to do that, be it that they own 100 acres or they own 1 acre where they can add a small second unit and it meets the zoning requirements. I just don't see the connection, so I don't see how we could support that, and I would like to hear from staff, be it planning and building staff or legal staff, on how that's gonna take us down the road to doing what we said we would do in our housing element, because I don't see the connection. So I'd like a response.
Okay,
So was that a question?
It was a question.
Okay.
Yes.
Sometimes
What?
it's hard to tell. Anyway,
please.
thank you. I think that there are ways that one could make the connection, but you're correct that it's not an exact connection without putting some of those restrictions in it. We certainly can work with planning and building to estimate the cost, what you're actually waiving in terms of the fees, and what they think the impact would be on their budget. It is, though, an idea that came up, and I think that there could be a connection to affordable housing, so it's worth looking at.
And where is it? Do you have it? Can you
Have
tell
what?
us what the connection is?
I think the connection would be to the extent that the housing, the less than 1,000 square foot, was intended to be affordable and to be used by someone for whom that's the target, then it contributes to the lower cost of creating that unit. The question is, how do you make that an explicit connection?
And if they rent it for market rate, then how have you accomplished affordability?
Well, that would be, you'd have to make sure that that didn't happen, so.
Supervisor Koufax, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
I think it's a question. As I go through the various comments in the document and presented to us, there are obviously some people who feel very strongly that this simply won't work. It's not productive. It's in fact could be counterproductive. Has the staff located any documents or any examples where the evidence is clearly indicative that an inclusionary housing ordinance works, particularly in an area where there's very little development? I think the comparison with Sonoma County now is beyond the question, but that's my question. But my reason for raising that is, if it's worked well in Sonoma County, that's a different scene down there. The context here is, I think, critical to an understanding of this issue as well. Have you located any clear indications that this works and has worked in a situation where we have relatively small developments and relatively little activity?
Please.
Yes, Yolo County has a mandatory inclusionary housing ordinance, and it has been slow because they tried to concentrate most of their building in the cities, and the cities have their own ordinances. But recently, speaking to the Director of Planning and Building over in Yolo County, he says that by the end of the year, they have 117 units that have now will be produced by they've been permitted and they're on the way to being built. And yes, it is working in Yolo County, and they have a very similar situation to us. There's mostly small developments going in, and so that's one area. The Sonoma County ordinance is a mandatory ordinance, and they have, as Supervisor Smith was saying, they have produced a numerous amount of units. They have been using a public-private partnership. A lot of times there are affordable housing private developers that